Map My Academic Pathway advising team. We are so excited that you're here today to talk about Central Carolina Promise and the K-14 program. And Miss Mary Schmidt-Carter, our resident expert, is here to talk to us today. And I'm really excited what she has in store for us. So welcome, Mary, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys for having me. And Amy, do you need me to, are we recording? Are we good? Oh, you are recording. Okay.
Are we recording?
Someone's recording.
Yes. Okay. Yes, we're good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know I had a lot of folks that asked. So thank everybody for joining us. Those of you that are just logging in, Amy and I were chatting a minute ago. This is a super quick session. I am not aiming to really give tons of in-depth information. So if there is follow-up that's needed afterwards, I'm happy to chat with folks one-on-one or do another session, another session in more depth. But this is just sort of a really quick overview, kind of based on some of the questions I've been getting so far from some of our advisors. So we are talking about Central Carolina Promise K-14. I always like to start off just reminding folks that Central Carolina Promise is not the same thing as Career and College Promise. We really need to get a little bit more creative in our naming, but Career and College Promise is the program that Dr. Newcomb runs. That is for the current high school students to take free college classes. Central Carolina Promise, which I'm really trying to nudge us more in the direction of K-14 to alleviate that confusion, is the free classes for students after graduation. So they're very similar, they dovetail, they tie together really nicely, but it is two different CCPs. Yay, super fun of my life. And if y'all do have questions as I go, I'm gonna try to kind of keep an eye on the chat, but Amy, if you see anything that pops up, feel free to interrupt me. So two different programs. Very, very briefly, the student experience is the main thing that we're kind of putting out towards the public. Students do have to be residents of one of our service area counties. That is because the program is funded through tax dollars. And so basically we want to make sure that students and their families are paying their taxes that invest in these programs. So they do have to complete those Career and College Promise classes while they're in high school. We are looking for either 12 credits or 4 classes. One of the two, it does not have to be both. And I did put a little note here that we've approved a COVID waiver in most cases where we're giving students credit for attempted courses instead of completed. So if they have W's, WE's, even F's in most cases, we are counting that for their eligibility. So we're grateful that the county has approved that. They do have to obviously graduate from high school. They have to enroll at CCCC. And the other piece that we get a lot of questions about is that this is a last dollar program. And so students do have to complete their FAFSA, they have to do their scholarship application, they basically have to show that they've exhausted any other potential funding sources before we can go ahead and kick in the K-14 funds. And I will talk a little bit more about that later. But the enrollment steps are all on our website. I'm really not even going to go through these in detail. I have tried as much as possible anytime we're talking about the program to align this checklist with what's on the website. But the main thing students need to do is complete their interest form. That's a Google form that gets them on my list, lets me know that they're interested, and helps me follow up with them directly about all the rest of the steps. So typically when I'm talking to students and parents, I say, if you take nothing else from this presentation today, please just know that we need you to do the interest form, and then I can kind of take over from there. And I will literally annoy the heck out of them until I get what I need for the program. But most of this is pretty straightforward, and it's things that any incoming students should be doing, like their admissions application, their FAFSA, their residency. There's really nothing here that's completely out of the ordinary other than maybe that interest form. So again, don't expect you all to remember this. If you're taking notes, don't worry, this is on the website, and I'm always happy to answer questions if they come up. The dates that we're working with right now, we have set what we're calling priority deadlines. We found in the past that anytime we tried to set a hard deadline, we just kept pushing it back and not adhering to it. And so really, there's no point in trying to have something that's really set in stone. So the reason we offer priority deadlines is we want to have students understand that there is a time, there's a flow to some of this processing. They really can't come out of the woodwork on August 10th and expect to have everything in place for the first day of class. So these priority deadlines were set up to sort of give them benchmarks to have certain things done, to allow them then to have their pieces done in a timely manner, allow me to do the things I need to do behind the scenes, and have everything ready to go for them on day one of the fall semester. So we will work with students after these dates. It's just a matter of, I may not have everything lined up, ready to go. Your funds may not be available there for day one of the semester. So really just kind of trying to manage their expectations of how this flows. Are there questions about that so far? Okay, I'm not hearing or seeing anything. So y'all know I talk really fast anyways, but since this is a short session, we're just plowing on ahead. So just to kind of give you an idea, for the summer, our current cohort, our 2019 graduates, their eligibility is ending right now this spring. So they are not 100% off my radar, but very little of my bandwidth at this point. Our 2020 grads, I just started yesterday reviewing their summer schedules. We're looking at the classes, making sure that what they're registered for matches their program. I know there's a couple of folks that I've already reached out to and said, hey, you know, Billy's program is welding, but I see that he's registered for criminal justice. Like, let's, you know, can we get this fixed? How can we address it? So I'm doing that. Also reviewing for SAP. We won't have an update on that until after classes have concluded, but financial aid will share that with me. I've had a lot of questions with folks about, you know, I might be withdrawing from a class. Is that going to affect my promise status? And really what I tell them is, we'll look at the SAP at the end of the semester. It does not automatically disqualify them from the K-14 program. But as we all know, if that is a habit, students continually withdraw, it will catch up with them at some point in terms of their either academic or financial aid SAP. And that could be problematic. So lots of questions, and I'm grateful, y'all that have reached out and asked these questions. I'm so glad that you know to come to me, and hopefully the answers are helpful. The other thing that we will do as we head into the semester is go ahead and review the student awards. I do this in conjunction with financial aid. They are wonderful, and we will actually put those K-14 funds in their account as long as we know that financial aid is either not available or has been exhausted. And then those other scholarships, I know Rodney's got I think the Step Up scholarship. There's various other ways that students can get coverage. And so the K-14 funds are used as like a gap coverage. It's not the first thing that we offer them. It's if the FAFSA and the scholarships do not cover their full tuition bill. Other thing to remember is just that we also do not cover textbooks. So if they're getting Pell money, that is usually enough to cover tuition and books and some of those associated costs. If they're using K-14 funds, it does stop once the tuition and the required fees have been covered. We do not cover anything from the bookstore or those digital access codes, which is endlessly confusing for the students. So we're working on ways of kind of communicating that better. So the main thing that I really wanted to focus on today were the changes that were coming up. I'm so grateful. It sounds like folks have paid attention and they kind of know what it is that we've been expecting in the past. But the really, really big change that I'm excited about is that we are no longer going to be requiring the students to be full-time. I think that this was a well-intentioned requirement when K-14 first came to being. I think the intention was to have students do what they needed to do to finish a degree in 2 years, and generally that is full-time. However, I was finding last fall that there were a multitude of reasons that a student may not be full-time. Amy mentioned earlier that she has a student that's getting ready to graduate and only needs 6 credits. Obviously, it would be silly to require extra things just to check a box to say they're full-time. We also had students who work with Megan Sherman for accessibility services who, you know, had accommodation plans that required them not to be full-time. Students, especially our AE students, tend to have some really funky sequencing things. And so sometimes a student would get to the point that they were only at 11 credits and the other class they needed was that physics 2, and it just wasn't going to work. So we had a lot of discussions. I will say that the provosts, Dr. Hall and Dr. Matthews, were especially helpful with this, but we looked at all the reasons why a student may not be full-time and just felt that it was not prudent to require that from them. So I'm implementing it now. You can see my little asterisks there that so far Chatham and Harnett County have blessed these changes. We are still waiting on the formal approval from Lee County, and then everything does still have to go through our Board of Trustees for CCCC. But I have been told repeatedly that we should be able to count on these changes actually becoming official. The other big change is that we're covering that summer between year 1 and year 2. So our 2020 grads right now that are transitioning from year 1 to year 2, again, I started reviewing schedules yesterday, and for the most part, they look great. A lot of students are not registered yet, but the ones who are, the evals look good. They're where they need to be. Y'all are doing a great job in terms of advising. I was really pleased to see where we're at already. So the kind of flip side about not requiring full-time is the counties were very, gosh, I just blanked on the word, very strict. They very much believed in not giving any kind of extension to students. So whether a student enrolls in K-14 full-time or whether they take one class per semester through those 2 years, that window closes the second spring after they graduate from high school. So we're hopefully making it more accessible and a little easier by not requiring full-time, but it also means that they have to strategically plan what they want to accomplish within that 2-year window. Now, if they're Pell eligible and that can continue beyond the 2 years, that's fine. It just means that they won't have that K-14, I'm going to start calling it gap insurance, if that's kind of a slightly reasonable analogy. They just won't have that K-14 as a backup. So, and then the other thing that changed, for a couple years, we were saying that we would not count the CCP classes in the summer after their senior year. We were kind of trying to take a snapshot of students' eligibility as of July 1, and Dr. Chapman really felt very strongly that we wanted to give students every possible opportunity to qualify for the program. So if by chance you're working with someone that's currently a high school senior, they're going to be a 2021 grad, they can, if need be, take classes this summer. Although I will say, in my review, the CCP advisors so far have done a really great job of making sure that students have those 12 credits or 4 classes, even with that COVID waiver. I mean, I don't think we're going to have a large contingency of students whose eligibility rests on this summer after high school. So those are the big changes. I'm going to pause right there because, again, I know I've been talking a lot. Do folks have immediate questions about any of that? And if I truly am going way too fast, I can slow down. So far, so good, Amy says. Okay. So those are the big things. The things that are not changing, and I don't know as much that y'all will be working with the new incoming students. I think admissions tends to catch more of those, but students do still have to have that interest form. It very specifically in our MOU states that students cannot be automatically enrolled in the program. And so that interest form is the one thing that so far I have stood really firm on, just to have a single point of entry to track that, yes, students indicated their interest. We didn't enroll them without their knowledge. There is a separate interest form for our 2020 grads, but we will accept them late in the program. I don't know if I covered that in the last slide. At one point, they were expected to come immediately following graduation, and if they did not, were not eligible to join the program later. We have also changed that. So they can come at any point within that 2-year window, but I will insist that they complete the interest form for their graduating year, just so that in all the mess of several hundred students, I have one place that we can kind of track everybody. So we did have a 2020 graduate that sent in his interest form within the last month, and we were able to get him in. He had all the other pieces in place. We were able to cover his spring classes, and we were good to go. But that interest form at the moment is non-negotiable. They do absolutely have to have those number of CCP classes in high school. But again, with that generous COVID waiver, I think that the vast majority of our students are meeting that requirement without too much trouble. They do have to make sure they take the classes within their declared major. This is something that has been prevalent with financial aid for a long time. I'm sure you all have, had students that got that panicked email that financial aid won't cover my classes. And it's like because the major, maybe they changed their major in their mind but didn't communicate that anywhere. So we are also looking to make sure that students are on track with their program. And then obviously the good SAP is required. Can't remember if I think it's somewhere in this presentation. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so tired today. But SAP for K-14, we are on a 1 semester delay from financial aid. So if a student falls into a warning or probation status with financial aid, they are still in good standing with me. If they fall into a first semester of suspension with financial aid, they will be on K-14 warning. So we can essentially offer them 1 additional semester of coverage and funding beyond what financial aid would cover. If they hit a second consecutive semester of suspension from financial aid, then they would also end up on suspension for K-14. But none of that would happen in a vacuum. We would make sure that we're communicating to students if they're placed on warning. That is also something I've gotten a lot of questions about from faculty advisors and students both. So SAP is important, and as much as possible, I'm trying to follow the guidelines that financial aid sets, just again on that 1 semester delay. And then again, it is not changing. They absolutely do have to submit their FAFSA and the scholarship application both years. That is something that I am also very firm on because I believe that the commissioners have been generous with the funds that they've given us. We want to make sure that we are good stewards of that money, and we want to make sure that students really are doing their best to exhaust any other funding sources before we dip into, quite frankly, all of our tax dollars. So that is not a negotiable piece at this point. Almost done, I promise. So these new students, I think I've talked about this a little bit. The 2021 group that is coming in for the fall, we have been accepting admission interest form submissions since October 1st. Students are given the information about the enrollment steps. I check all of the records at least every 2 weeks, and they get a reminder on the 1st of the month that is personalized to them. So, dear Alex, you've completed steps 1, 5, and 6, but you have not done 2, 3, and 4. Here are all the links. Please make sure you do these things. Amanda Carter was really helpful in helping me color code so that it's sort of at a glance, students can see what's done and what's not. So that is a monthly email that they get. As of this morning, we had 316 total interest form submissions for that 2021 group, and the viable students that are still in the running for fall is 264. I am hoping that those numbers will at least double for next year. We'll see. And the ones that are not viable at this point are either duplicate interest forms, or it's somebody that graduated in 1995, or it's a student that unfortunately lives in Wake County or something like that. So it's not a huge part of what's coming in. Most of the students are eligible, but I'm pretty pleased with where we're at the moment with that. So how can you help as an advisor? Anybody that is a potential student. So right now, again, 2019, unfortunately, they are no longer eligible at this point. But if they were a 2020 or will be a 2021 graduate, they do need to fill out the interest form. The one here is for 2021. If I get any 2020 grads that fill out that interest form, I'll redirect them and I'll work with them to fill out the correct interest form for their cohort. But that's, if you take nothing else away from this presentation, please make sure that you direct them to the interest form. And if you're working with those students that are transitioning to their second year with us, please try to remind them that they do need that FAFSA and the scholarship application. I am reaching out. I'm gonna want to be real angry with any student that says, oh, I didn't know I had to do that, because they are being told, but I know that some will miss the memo. And so that is a really big piece, just making sure that they're looking at those other funding sources. And again, y'all have been really, really great about reaching out. Students reach out, you reach out, whatever you need. We did create that Promise K-14 email address specifically to address any concerns here. And thank you, Amy, for sharing the link for that. That's perfect. So those are things that as an advisor, you can be doing to kind of help smooth this process along. I don't want to ask a lot from you because it's not your job to make sure that they're in compliance for K-14 and that kind of thing. But I promise that I am trying to be as proactive as possible. Every once in a while, I may CC you on an email. I did this to Derek Lewis yesterday. There was a student that was in the pre-nursing program, but then her summer classes were not part of the pre-nursing program. And I said, hey, we need to talk about maybe a second major, changing majors, that kind of thing. And I CC'd Derek just so that he kind of was in the loop. So thus far, for spring and summer both, anytime I have reached out to our faculty advisors, either with an FYI or a request, you all have been incredibly accommodating, and I'm so grateful for that. It's made a big difference in the way that we run the program. So after I ask how you can help, my question for you would be, how can I help? And what questions do you have? What have I not covered? What did I miss?
So just out of curiosity, Mary, so it sounds like you have some students you advise, and then there are some K-14 students that have separate advisors. Is that right?
Yes, so technically I am not the academic advisor for any of our K-14 students. My advising caseload is about 100 CCP homeschool students, but I do get all sorts of questions because, as you all know, sometimes they latch onto one name and think that we can do everything for them. So I'm not actually the academic advisor for K-14, but I'm happy to try to redirect the students to where they need to be.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Scott says, maybe you can remind advisors how they would find out if their advisees are Promise students. So advisors, if you are in a VSO, on that profile page, that main tab for students, there should be a tag. Let me think of one that I can pull up real quick just to look at. And I think I know, but I just don't want to make it up. If you're on the profile tab for a student in a VSO, I think somewhere a little bit further down to the bottom, there are tags, and it will indicate Chatham Promise, Harnett Promise, or Lee Promise. Yeah, that's probably the easiest place. If anybody wants to get in the weeds about student types and that kind of thing, I could tell you, but I think that location in a VSO probably is the easiest way to find if somebody is in the Promise program. That is assigned through a student type, and if at any point the student voluntarily exits the program, or if we have to remove them due to SAP status or something, we will end that student type, and then that tag should disappear if for some reason they're no longer active in the program. Great question. Trying to think, there's probably not anywhere else that y'all have access to. I have loads and loads of Google Sheets. I'm not lying when I say that I close my eyes at night and I see grids and Excel sheets and all that kind of stuff. But a VSO is probably the easiest way to view that. So I am definitely going to stick around. I'm going to turn it back over to Amy if she has any other questions or follow-up. This is all of my contact information here. Hopefully y'all know how to get a hold of me, but please let me know how I can help. If we want to review any of this in more depth or anything like that, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I have a really random thought that I don't know is helpful to other people. But last year and this year, I've had dual enrollment students that are graduating. And around this time through June, they were assigned to me to come to the college as traditional age students. And so with both those groups, I was able to help them go through the interest form last year. And then I'm getting ready to work with another student like that today. And so I thought that might be a helpful reminder to other people if they have that same experience.
I think that's a great point, and I'm going to give Scott an opportunity if he wants to jump in at all, but I know that we have had some really surface level conversations about that transition. I think that when they have been a CCP student during high school and they're transitioning either to K-14 or to a traditional college student, that perhaps is not always the smoothest transition for various reasons. So I know that is something that is on my radar. I have some opinions if anyone wants to listen, but I think that is a tricky transition. And so I think I would love to focus on some ways to improve that for the students. So. And Pam, yes, all of this information mostly should be on the K-14 website, but I know that Amy has been recording the presentation. Amy, can you let folks know where they would find it afterwards? And yes, Rodney, please fire away.
Yes, and so actually Mary Ann has been recording, but once this is done, it will be posted on the continuing education or the professional development website. And what I mean by that is it's actually log into Blackboard and then go to the professional development section, and it's logged in the spring 2021 folder. So I will type that out if that's helpful.
Yeah,
So
that's where
Mary
they
and
should be
Scott, it
housed.
sounds
Yep.
like you all might be working on a cheat sheet. Okay, good.
So my question is this:
And
is
Mary and Scott, it sounds like you guys are working on it. Rodney, I'll let you go, and then I'll ask.
sorry. I'm sorry. I was waiting for you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were finished. No, I have the question I have is those tags that are in Aviso. Is it still true that K-14 is like the if they had Pell, then they probably. I mean, even though you'll see the K-14 tag in there, they may not technically be receiving money from you. Are you still tagging students even if they're not receiving K-14 money?
That is
Because
a
it used.
great question. Yeah. And that is something Stormy and I have talked a lot about. And so the short answer is yes, they will still have that tag even if we are not providing K-14 funds to them. We keep them active in the program, and that way if there were to come a day that for whatever reason their Pell did not cover or they lost a scholarship between year 1 and year 2, we basically are planning to activate them at the beginning of their 2-year eligibility window and then really not deactivate them until the end of the 2 years unless there's a really specific reason to remove them from the program. So
Yeah.
they could have a tag if they're not currently enrolled. They could have a tag if they're not receiving K-14 funds. I've heard lots of different things from that from different folks. I think it's a nice PR move for the counties to be able to say, look at all these students in our program, even if they're only funding a third of them. So
Yeah.
it's not perfect, but yeah, that's where we're at. But they do still have to meet the requirements too. Like I'm still checking their schedules, even if they're getting Pell, you know, they're not really getting any exceptions in that sense.
Yeah, I was just asking because I have had a couple of kids that were like step up scholar, and then for whatever reason they changed program or whatever, and but I could go in and see, and so now that they can actually, since you still have that, since now we have the 2-year active window, that's actually pretty nice if they get in and decide, okay, I'm not going to do engineering, I'm going to do cosmetology, then they're still K-14 eligible. That was kind of unclear at the beginning of K-14, but it's nice that that's been cleared up and that they are still eligible. So.
And I think initially the intention was to track students. We wanted them to graduate in June, come to us in August. I'm grateful that we've opened the window for them to come in at any time during the 2 years, but I know that it is going to wreak a little bit of havoc for Stormy because it will change then, you know, if we take a snapshot of that first semester for data purposes and then we're adding students along the way, it complicates things a little bit, but not enough that we didn't want to do it. So I think that expanding it was the right call, even though it data-wise it'll get a little messy, but that's okay.
Yeah. You're still helping students. That's
exactly. Exactly. So, all right. I know that we are just about out of time. Amy, I'll let you wrap up, but I just want to say thank you again to everybody. Please reach out. Let me know how I can help. And I really appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Mary, so much for coming and explaining all of that information in such a short amount of time. And thanks to everyone for participating and asking such great questions. We will continue the series in the fall, and we hope you come back to learn some more things. So have a wonderful day, and we will talk to you all later.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.